Hola a todos. Good morning or good afternoon, guys. Hope everybody's having a great day so far. Today we're going to be doing a little bit of review. So as you saw in yesterday's lesson, I did a little bit of a checkpoint review, meaning that we're going to take a little break for moving on to the rest of the chapter material. Excuse me, just to do a checkpoint review. So before we move on, I want to make sure everybody's understanding what we're talking about so far. We just have one section left in our grammar before we finish off this chapter in the unit, in Unit 4. And we'll be having our test next week. So I do want to take, a couple of days of review before we talk about the next grammar lesson. And we have our extensive review day for our test coming up next Monday. So that's a big heads up for you guys. There will be a chapter test on Monday. So again, you'll have these couple of days to review. We'll talk about that last section, which isn't too bad because it's actually something that you've seen before briefly, and you can apply your knowledge on that to that lesson. So it won't be too bad. And then Friday we'll have a review day over everything we've talked about, and then your test will be on Monday. So I feel like we're preparing ourselves pretty well for that test coming up. So you had your review yesterday on prepositional phrases, which is something we really need to be familiar with. And then today I want to do a review on those verb conjugations. For the most part, I think people are getting the hang of that, but I do still see some people struggling with those conjugations. And don't feel bad, that's understandable. Those verb conjugations, especially those irregulars and those stem changing, can be a little difficult and take some practice. So this is what today is for. We're going to focus all of our lessons today on those verb conjugations, okay? So just a heads up, there will be quite a bit of note taking, as you can see. And then there'll be some cutting and pasting activities to make some foldables for you guys to have something in your notebooks to review over the next several days before your test. So be prepared for that. You'll need your notebook, something to write with. I encourage some markers, highlighters to kind of keep things a little bit more colorful. For some reason, I feel like that always helps me kind of stay focused. And then you'll see scissors and glue to attach our foldables that we're going to be using today. Okay? I may cut this lesson up into 2 videos because I will be talking about regular and irregular IR conjugations. And then we're also going to be talking about those stem changing verbs that we saw in the last chapter or 2. Okay? So like I said, you may be seeing 2 videos from me kind of split up in 2 parts here. So let's begin with IR verb conjugations. We saw some irregular ones in this chapter, but in order for us to really understand an irregular verb, we also need to look at the regular verb. How is that different? Okay? So in your notebooks, let's start off by copying this part down. Now before you get to the copying part, and I ask you to pause the video and then copy this in your notes, let me explain what's going on here, okay? So let's title our section, regular IR conjugation. And I'm going to make a large conjugation chart. Okay, this is for you guys to make sure to put all that information that we need in there and it fits. So of course we have our subject pronouns, which you guys are used to. Again, we don't conjugate with vosotros, so we X that out. We have yo, tú, él, ella, usted in our singular side. Again, first, second, and third person. And then we have the nosotros or nosotras, if that's feminine. And then the ellos, ellas, and ustedes on our plural side. Again, first and third person. So what happens with IR conjugations is, remember, we have our verb here, for example, vivir. It's an IR verb, and I forgot to include that. Vivir means to live. And you may have seen this verb previously, but vivir means to live, okay? Now, it is an IR verb, and as you guys know, what we do when we conjugate, we remove that IR ending, either AR, ER, or IR. Well, in this case, it's an IR verb. It's in the infinitive. So I remove that, and I'm left with that, V-I-V. remember this part of the word, whatever is left after I remove that ending, is called the stem. And I know we've seen this before, but again, this is a review. So in case you forgot or you missed that section in the lesson, I'm kind of going over every little piece here. So to my stem is where I add my conjugation endings, right? I don't have the IR anymore. I'm left with my stem, to which I add my endings here. Well, my regular IR verb conjugation rule tells me that in the yo form, I have to add an O. In the tú form, I add an ES, S. In the él, ella, and usted form, I add an E, E. In the nosotros form, we're on the plural side now, I add an IMOS, imos. And in the ellos, ellas, and ustedes form, I add an EN, N. Okay, so before we move on, let me have you guys pause this section right now, pause the video now, and copy this, this chart into your notebooks, just as you see it here. Simple, okay? Go ahead and do that now. So if you're back, that means you have our conjugation chart in your notebook. Muchachos, please make sure you have it. Don't just skip over and say you did it and just, ignore this. You need this to study with, okay? So again, those ending are O, S, E, imos, en. And if you guys can kind of turn that into a little chant that you can memorize, then you can apply this regular IR conjugation rule to any of those regular IR verbs. O, S, E, imos, en. O, S, E, imos, en. So again, kind of turn it into like a little song that you can memorize, and that'll help you conjugate all of those verbs. So let's practice with vivir, okay? So we know the rule. We chop off that IR ending, and we're going to pop in our new one. So to say I live, how would I say that, muchachos? Chop off the IR, pop in an O. So you would say yo vivo. I live. To say you live again. Tú is ES. So how would I say that, muchachos? Chop off the IR. I have my stem. Add an ES. Tú vives. Tú vives. You live. Now the third person. Él, ella, or usted. And I'm just using él in this case, but of course you can plug in whatever applies to your sentence. My rule tells me to add an A. So again, how would I say he lives, for example? Well, I have my stem. I chop off the IR, pop in the E. So, and that's a V, sorry. That looks like an R. Él vive. Él vive. Okay, so we conjugated our singulars. Let's do our plural now. To say we live. And again, nosotros is for masculine, nosotras will be for feminine, just depending on what your sentence is saying. But again, I'm just going to use a nosotros form. My rule tells me to add an imos. So here again, I'm going to chop off that IR. I have my stem, and I plug in the imos. So we live, nosotros vivimos. Nosotros vivimos. And in the ellos, ellas, or ustedes form, I'm just going to use ellos. My rule is to pop in an EN. So, same rule. I chop off the IR ending. I plug in I'm left with my stem, and I plug in or pop in my new ending. So to say they live would be ellos viven. Ellos viven. Okay? So again, this is the rule that applies to all regular IR verbs. And we're going to see, or we have seen, and we're going to continue to see a few of those in this chapter. So that's the rule you apply to those regular IR verbs. Now we did see two irregular IR conjugations. Okay, so let's see how that looks different from the regulars. Okay, and for these I did have you guys use some foldables. And I believe Mr. Martin has those ready for you guys. So if you'd like to pause this video now in case you don't have them yet, you may pause the video now and get those copies from Mr. Martin, and I'll explain how to use them in just a second. So if you guys are back, that means you have your sheets ready to go. So before we get into, the conjugation and all that, let me show you how we're going to put these together, okay? So let's do one at a time, of course. So what I want you guys to do is cut all along the little rectangle here. And it is going to become a foldable. And I love foldables just because it makes things a little bit more interactive. When it's time to study, you're able to flip open and shut and kind of quiz yourself in case you're studying by yourself, or, make things a little bit more interactive if you're studying with somebody. So I use foldables a lot. Unfortunately, I haven't been able to do that with this class because of the nature of our class. We do a lot of things through Google Classroom. But any little chance that I do get to use these with you, these last several weeks of school, I will try my best to incorporate them because I think they're very useful. So we're just going to cut along. Once we get here, be careful, follow instructions carefully, please, because I've had a lot of students mess these up, and I don't think we have very many extra copies in class. So once you have this, we're going to now cut in between each of those little subject pronoun squares up to that solid line. Do not cut past that. So these are going to become like little flaps that you're going to be able to open and close. So cut up to there and stop. Same on the other side. Cut to the solid line and stop. And cut to the solid line and stop. So you're going to be left with something that looks like this. You should be able to kind of flip these back and forth. Okay? So before we move on, let's do the other one. So it's ready for us to go. Okay? So again, I'm going to cut. And you guys should be able to do this along with me. You don't have to pause the video or anything. This is kind of like a live thing going on. So you should be cutting along with me. Now, if I'm going a little too fast, or if somebody's a little bit left behind, then of course you can go in and pause and wait till everybody's caught up. But I'm trying to work, as I would in class. So I'm hoping that everybody can be kind of catching up with me. And I'll go in there and do the same exact thing. Cut to the solid line and stop. Other side, same thing. Alright, so now that we have these, we're going to have, and the reason we have two is because we did see two irregular IR verbs, okay? Now, it's gonna, the fit here is going to be a little tight, but we'll make it work, okay? So what I want you to do now, guys, notice how this little space here says, fold words along edges. This is the back. Paste this blank box side down. Words will fold to meet each other in the middle. So if you guys can now actually turn this over, and we're going to fold each little flap in. So along that solid line that we cut up to, we're actually going to fold there, and it's going to create a little flap. So you'll be able to see those words right side up now when you fold them in. Again, I'm going to fold this side. And same over here. Okay, and we're going to do the same with the other. Turn it over and then fold your little flaps You'll be able to see those subject pronouns appear. So muchachos, while you guys are doing this, let me just give a quick announcement. I'm still seeing some students with missing assignments. Unfortunately, there are some of you, and you know who you are because I've sent private messages, and I've actually requested the help of Miss Stockton, your counselor, in getting parent contact information, because there's some of you who have not turned in a single assignment, believe it or not. Putting you out on blast. A single assignment since the 6 weeks began. And as you can imagine, you are failing. So, muchachos, please make sure that you're turning those assignments in. Obviously, this is not something you'll turn in to me, but it's something that you're supposed to be completing and marking as complete to keep track of your assignments. And of course, everything that is submitted to me needs to be submitted for a grade. I cannot give you a grade if I don't have anything to grade. And, you know, I know some of you are seniors trying to get your last credit to graduate. Some of you, you know, are not. But in order for you to move on to the next Spanish level, you need to have credit for this one. And you not turning in assignments is really not allowing you to do that. Then you'll just have to repeat the course. So please, muchachos, I mean, that's all I'm asking. Complete your assignments, turn them in for a grade, and that's it. I mean, you know, just like you do for your other classes, do for this one as well, to make sure that you guys have that credit at the end of the class. Okay, so just my little rant there. Let's go ahead and continue here. So in order for us to kind of label what our verbs we're going to be talking about here, take a marker, and we're going to be labeling it on the side, okay? So we're going to be talking about el verbo ir, which means to go. And we were looking at that one in our activities here, talking about, you know, traveling and going somewhere. And then the second one we're going to be looking at is el verbo salir. Salir, which means to leave or to go out. And again, you saw that one. We're talking about traveling out, leaving somewhere. All right, now let's go ahead and glue our little foldables here so we can start writing in them. So again, you're going to see those words come up again. That's the section that we're going to glue down. So with your glue stick or glue bottle, let's go ahead and glue that section down. And you can actually open these up just to kind of press that really well in there. And you guessed it, we'll do the same with the other one. Oh, sorry. And we'll put this one right underneath it. Alright, so now we can see our little conjugation charts. We see our subject pronouns. On the outside in Espanol, again, we have that second person plural crossed out. That's the vosotros form that we don't conjugate with. See the subject pronouns on the outside, and on the inside, we're going to write the conjugation of the verb. So, remember, what makes this verb an irregular verb, remember, irregular means that they don't follow a specific conjugation rule. Those regular IR verbs, all you got to do is follow this rule. Plug in one of those endings depending on the subject and you're good to go. The irregular IR verbs, are different because they don't follow a rule. These are the ones that you have to just memorize. There's no going around it. There's no tricks or nothing. You just have to memorize them, okay? So this is why these tend to be a little bit more difficult, especially to those learning the language for the very first time. So what happens with this verb, notice it's an IR verb, right? And there's really no IR ending, if you will, because the whole word is just IR. Okay? So what happens here, muchachos, let me grab my pencil in case you guys want to erase this when we're done. But remember the rule is to chop off the, let me zoom it a little bit here for you guys. Remember the rule is to chop off the IR at the ending of a word, right? Well, what happens when I chop off the IR ending, right? I'm saying that in quotations because it's my whole word. I'm not left with a stem. Remember, the stem is what's left after I remove that ending. In the regular verbs, well, actually in irregular ones as well, but I'm left with a stem here that I can add the ending to. Well, in the ir, I don't have a stem. I'm left with nothing. So what do I have to do now? That's where that V in this verb comes in. Okay? So I'm going to add a V. That's going to become my stem. Now, why a V? To be honest, I couldn't tell you. There's really no reason, no rule, no explanation for it. It's just one of those it is what it is kind of things in our language of Spanish. So that's where that V comes in. Okay? And the ending to this conjugation of the verb are a little different from the regular IR verbs. Okay? So, in here, I'm going to put yo. Notice this is my subject is yo. Yo voy. Tú vas. Él, ella, usted va. Nosotros o nosotras vamos. En ellos, ellas, en ustedes van. So you'll notice I'm going to come in here and highlight my endings. Remember that V is my stem. Again, it came out of nowhere because I'm left with no stem, so that's where that V comes in. No real explanation as to why that V, but that's where it comes in from. And I'm left, and that adds, those endings. Hoy, has, a, amos, an. Those are my endings to that ir verb. So again, one of those that you just have to memorize. Okay? So to say I go, yo voy. To say you go, tú vas. He goes, él va. Or she goes, or usted. Usted, remember, it has to be the third person singular because I'm speaking in the formal form. Él, ella va, or usted va. We go, nosotros or nosotras vamos. And they or you all go. They is ellos, ellas van. And you all go, ustedes van. Okay? So now you have a little study guide or cheat sheet to help you with those IR verb conjugations. Now let's look at salir. Salir is a little different because salir is only considered irregular in one way. Okay, and I'll explain that in just a second. So salir, it's another IR verb, right? My rule tells me to cross out my ending, and I'm left with, remember what this is called? The stem. So this one I do have a stem, thankfully. So that means that my word is going to begin that way in all conjugations. Sal, sal, because that's my stem. That's what I'm left with. And my stem doesn't change in this case. You did learn that there are some stem changing verbs, which we'll get to in a second. But in this case, this is not one of them. And you know what, guys? Actually, something we can do, because this thing keeps kind of bothering me. Let's glue down that X, since we're not going to be even opening that up. So that way we can make sure that one just stays closed. Okay? Just close that one out. Now, you know that in the regular IR verbs, these are my endings here. O, es, e, imos, en. Well, what happens in salir, they're all the same except for one. The only one that's going to change here is the yo form. So instead of saying yo salo, right, that's what my regular verb rule tells me. In salir, I'm actually going to change that ending to go, salgo. So we actually call this a go verb. You might hear it phrased that way, the go verb. Because in the yo form, instead of an o, I add a go. What happens to all the other ones? They follow the regular IR conjugations. So that's easy. You know, you just follow those regular. If you memorize that o, es, imos, en, then you can apply that to this one, except in the yo form, right? So tú, if you go back to your little chart here, I'm going to be kind of looking back. In the tú form, again, what do I add? An es. In the él, ella, and usted form, what do I add again? An e. In the nosotros form, go back to your chart, imos. And in the ellos and ellas form, en. Okay? So now, I have my subject pronouns with my conjugations, but you're going to notice that they're very similar to the regular verb conjugations, except in the yo form. So again, to say I leave, yo salgo, not yo salo. Do not apply that O in there because salir is irregular. Keep that in mind. Salir is one of our irregular verbs. What makes this verb irregular is that yo form. So what I'm going to do is make a little star on that yo flap to remind you that that's the only thing that makes this verb salir, my IR verb, an irregular verb. Everything else ends like a regular verb except for the yo form, which is a go ending. Okay? So again, I leave, yo salgo. You leave, tú sales. He, she, or usted leave. Él sale. We leave. Nosotros salimos. And they leave. Ellos salen. Or you all leave. Ustedes salen. Okay? So now you have this study material, this little cheat sheet area here in your notebook, where you can see the difference between a regular IR conjugation and how that looks like, and those irregular IR verbs we saw in this chapter. Okay? So please use this, muchachos. Do not use this and look at this as a little empty area in your notebook. This is for you to use, study for your tests with, use during your activities in class, and work on memorizing these two, the conjugations of ir and salir, because again, they are irregular, so they don't really follow a rule. It's just a matter of memorizing those. Okay? All right, excellent. So make sure you keep this in there handy. We will be using it to review on Friday before your test on Monday, so please make sure you have this. In case anybody was absent, you guys can please let your classmates know to go over this lesson. Do not just skip it because it's going to be very important for your review material for that test on Monday. Okay? So I'm going to stop the video now. A little longer than I expected, so we'll probably have to move through the other one a little quicker. But the next video is going to be on the stem changing verbs, okay, that we were talking about in this lesson. So I'll see you guys in just a little bit.